In the 2009 PISA test, India ranked 72nd out of the 73 participating countries. Every year, ASR report highlights the poor state of education in India. Although India has been able to get almost every child into classroom, that has not necessarily translated into learning. Improving learning outcomes by overcoming rote learning is the need of the hour. Technology can be the fulcrum that we can leverage to solve current problems of varying learning levels in the classroom and getting them to learn. Today, I talk to Pranav Kothari, Vice President of Educational Initiatives. In this episode, we talk about Pranav's personal journey from Harvard Business School to education sector, the organization's work in developing high quality assessments, and the role of personalized learning in shaping education reform. The company developed MindSpark, a technology-based personalized adaptive learning tool that draws on a database of questions and answers to anticipate common mistakes. I know, like me, you have a lot of questions in mind. Let us dive into the conversation. With that said, welcome to Reinvent. My first question is that before we start talking about MindSpark, educational initiatives and all, I'm just curious to know from Harvard Business School to education sector in India, how this happened? What's the story?
Sure. So, I was studying at Harvard Business School. I was doing my 2-year MBA program. And what I found in that during that studies is multiple case studies of different social enterprises. The first one was the Arvind Eye Hospital in Madurai. And, when I heard about what the founder did and the way they operate, I was very moved. Was fascinated that they had some of the highest quality standards in the world when it came to cataract eye operations. They had done innovations to reduce the cost of the lens. They were giving away 60% of the surgeries for free to poor people. There were interns coming from, Harvard Medical School, Johns Hopkins to do this. And all of this they were doing in a self-sufficient way. So I really was deeply moved by the cause and the way they were set up, where people like you and me who can actually afford it will pay full rate, but there would be price discrimination. And they would give discounts all the way, 100% discounts for patients who couldn't pay. The second year, there were a lot of other social entrepreneurs who came to campus. I took a lot of courses. And by that time, one thing that became clear to me is that I had the fortune of a really good education. I went to convent school, St. Xavier's. Then I went to Georgia Tech for engineering. And I got a chance to go to Harvard for my MBA. And it's not because I was very smart. I got lucky, and there were a lot of people who supported me. Someone paid for it. Someone gave the emotional support to stay in a foreign country. Someone provided the mentorship and the advice to get it. So I thought the best use of my education is to be a support system for others. And that's the reason I moved back to India to help improve education for low-income students.
Right. I mean, after coming to India also, can you tell us that one incident or moment that really moved you and, that motivated you to get into this?
Yeah, many. I mean, in fact, because of those, after 9 years, I'm still in the sector pursuing the same mission. Early on, the one I remember very vividly is we had started these MindSpark centers in urban slums of Delhi. To be honest, it was my first time that I had stepped into a slum, like Sangam Vihar, for example, in Delhi. And we had opened this center where children would come for 2 hours to learn MindSpark, reading and math. And, there was this child who was only 6 years old, and he was the first time, like he was working on a computer. And, I had to hold his hand on the mouse and get him to click on a particular place. And, literally I felt like an electric sensation in my body. And, I was really very moved by the fact that the work that I was doing was actually, helping someone on the ground. It was real. It wasn't like I was sitting in an office and making slides. It wasn't like I was, making an investment proposal. It wasn't like I was making a grant proposal. I was in the middle of, some of Delhi's poorest neighborhoods, helping children who had not even seen a TV learn how to operate a computer. And since then, I've had many more experiences, but that's the first one I remember vividly.
Right. Now talking about AI, I just wanted to know what is the main problem that you guys are solving?
Yeah, so at Educational Initiatives, which started more than 20 years ago, the founders, Sridhar, Sudhir, and Venkat, the mission is a, a world where every child is learning with understanding. So the main problem that we are trying to solve is that of rote learning. You know, the fact that Indian education में इतना रट्टा मार के सब लोग सीखते हैं, the fact that they are just simply memorizing for exams without understanding concepts is the biggest problem that we're trying to solve. Now, rote learning is different from memorization. For example, let's say multiplication tables, right? So actually, it's good if you memorize tables because it makes you faster in multiplication and division and adding of fractions and doing LCM and algebra. So it's actually good to memorize multiplication, but you have to understand the concept that multiplication is repeated addition, right? Or when you're multiplying in area, length into breadth, you are essentially covering a space, right? So as long as you understand the concept and then you memorize to become faster at it, there is not an issue. But in India, people are just memorizing without understanding. They're memorizing definitions like that of photosynthesis. They are memorizing proofs of theorems. I don't know, in Three Idiots, you would have seen this, situation when a professor asks, what is a machine? And Amir Khan gives an answer and the professor says, no, and then, Silencer gives an answer, which is a replica of what's in the textbook. And he says, very good. So, just the sheer memorization of facts, figures, procedures without conceptually understanding is the biggest problem that we're solving.
Now, while the organization is in this exploring phase, I just wanted to know, is the scene anything different in private schools? Because generally private schools are very much celebrated in our country, right?
No, we actually did a study, Pranay, where we actually took the top 100 best private schools of India in the 5 metros of Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, Hyderabad, and Kolkata. And we found that the problem of rote learning is pervasive. So it happens in our top 100 best private schools all the way to government schools. In fact, the study was published on the cover page of India Today, right? And subsequently, we did other studies that were published in Mint and Hindustan Times and were sponsored by Wipro. So this problem of rote learning actually is across socioeconomic classes. It's across government school and private schools. It's across boys and girls. It's across anything. Like, it is so pervasive. And one of the reasons for that is that our board exams are asking questions that essentially force you to memorize. So if you look at our board exam, our 10 standard board exams, the vast majority of the paper, to get more marks, you have to simply memorize and essentially give this. So because the 10th standard board exam is like that, the 9th standard students start preparing like that. And so the 8th standard students are preparing like that. Suddenly you find now in the 2nd and 3rd standard, the types of questions that are getting asked are simply just focusing on rote. It doesn't matter how much you've understood. So India took this PISA test, right? So PISA test it took in 2009. PISA is administered in 74 countries of the world, and it's a test of 10th standard knowledge of language, maths, and science taken by 15-year-old students. And India stood second last in the world, right? And this is because we find that the tests that check for conceptual understanding, India does really poor. In fact, the other study that I mentioned about the top 100 private schools, we actually put in some items from international tests, and we found that the top 1% of Indian students are actually at the 50th percentile of global students when it comes to conceptual learning. So we do very well on procedural questions, on recall-based questions, and we do really badly on understanding-based questions.
Right. So you solve these problems, if I understood correctly from what I read and researched, through 2 solutions. One is ESSET and one is MindSpike. Am I correct?
Yeah. So the 2 theories of change are by making high quality assessments, and which is under the brand of ASSET. And the second is by making a technology-based, research-based, personalized adaptive learning solution. So what the assessment does is it actually figures out where the problem is, right? So if you look at the medical analogy, you have X-rays, you have MRIs, you have blood tests, you have COVID swab tests, etc. There's a full field of diagnostics that sort of figures out where exactly is the problem, and that's what ASSET does. It sort of figures out where are children having misconceptions, what are they making mistakes, and then we talk to the students and we do this research on why are they answering wrong, or where is the lack of concept. Then we make a technology-based learning software called MindSpark, which takes this research and actually helps the children learn. Right? So in the medical analogy, you have medicines, you have surgeries, you have treatments, you have physiotherapy, multiple things. So MindSpark is the solution towards the problem of rote learning.
Right. I just wanted to ask something about ASSET that, is it another PISA or do you guys do something differently from regular tests, And I also wanted to know that while starting ASSET and all, is that the data problem is the main thing you guys tried to solve?
Yeah, great questions. So see, PISA is a test only for 15-year-old students, which means children are, somewhere between 9th and 10th standard. Whereas the ASSET test covers entire grades from standard 3 to standard 10. So there's a test for every standard, right? So we have a 5th standard maths paper, we have a 5th standard science paper, we have a 5th standard social studies paper. We also have a 6th standard, 7th standard, 8th standard paper. So we do math, science, social studies, English, and Hindi. For grades 3 to 10. And the beauty about ASSET is the types of questions. You can go on our website, you can take a sample test, you can look at some of the sample questions, but the questions are designed after many, many months of rigorous research on, what is the concept, what should a child understand from the concept, how should the question be designed, what should be the different options in a multiple choice question, why should a particular option be there. It's sort of taken by, a full team of more than 300 people at EI that sort of, works around it to make very high quality questions. And that's sort of the beauty of ASSET. Yes, I think initially when we started in 2001, there was no standardized assessments in India. I mean, even today, right? There is not a single standardized assessment in India except maybe the 10th standard board exam. And so there's huge lack of data. Both 20 years ago when we started the ASSET, ASSET is now taken by about 5 lakh students every year. But even today, right, apart from ASSET, there is no other data source on this. There are like government studies and independent organizations that are doing studies and publish data, but it's at a very aggregate level. There isn't much data on, in grade 4, in fractions, when it comes to adding 1/4 plus 2/3, what are the reasons children answer wrong? Why do they pick? So that type of data is not available except through the ASSET and the work that we do.
Right. So the research you get from ASSET then gets converted through the program of MindSpark using technology is what I understood. But before I go and ask about MindSpark in detail, I'm just curious to know, is it the back approach you guys took? I mean, if you get the assessments right, so that you'll understand where the every stakeholder is, standing. That's how, find solutions from backward. Like, did I understood correctly?
Yeah, so the founders actually, so the Sridhar, Sudhir, and Venkat are IIM Ahmedabad MBAs in 93 batch, right? So they actually, the first 5 years of their career, they worked in different companies like IBM, Sony, etc. But then they actually started a school in Ahmedabad called the Eklavya School in 1996, and still amongst the top 3 schools in Ahmedabad. And, way back in 96, they started the school. They also started a teacher training college on campus. They ran the school for 5 years. And what they found during that time is that this problem of rote learning is, perverse. It's sort of everywhere. And essentially, as they started seeing that there was nobody to really show this, right? Because optically, everything looks great. The school bus comes on time, the students wear a tie, they come into the classroom, the teacher comes in, the teacher is teaching, the students bring their textbooks, they do their homework. So if you look at it from the outside, everything looks great. But the moment you check whether a student understood it, that's when you start realizing. So because there wasn't anything like that, that's when they started EI and the ASSET test in 2001. So from 2001 to 2009, all we did was assessments, right? That's all we did in that time is we asked questions, we looked at data, we asked students, we understood why they answered that, we read research papers, we made a list for every grade subject. Where are those challenges? Only after doing 10 years of that, we built a solution called MindSpark. So MindSpark's biggest advantage is that it's built on a foundation of 10 years of academic research on where children have misconceptions, and then it sort of helps to solve it. So in the journey, the first phase was identifying the problem when they were running the school. The second phase was assessing the problem through the assessments. And the third phase is finding the solution to tackle those causes.
Now, can you tell us in detail about MindSpark? What is MindSpark? And tell us what all it has.
Yeah, so if you look at what is problems that you're solving in the Indian education space, right? The number one is that we're a very large country. We have a very large number of students, and we are essentially, there's a lot of diversity. Now, even if you were to take one village where everybody is from the same race, they're from the same background, they roughly have the same, socioeconomic status, they essentially are from similar families, they go to the school. Let's now within that take 10-year-olds who are studying in 4th standard, or take 12-year-olds who are studying in 6th standard. What you would find is that children are at a range of abilities from the equivalent of, grade 1 to grade 6. So what I mean by that is that you will find a 12-year-old who has gone to school for 6 years, still doesn't know how to recognize a letter or, sort of add 2 plus 3. And you would also find another 12-year-old who is sort of doing algebra, right? And everything in between. So you essentially will find very weak students, very bright students. And now let's say you are the world's best teacher. You're very motivated, you're well-trained, you're very intelligent, you're very committed, you're coming in and you're teaching great content. But there are very few kids who are at the 6th standard ability level. So your job is to finish the 6th standard syllabus because that's what your boss has asked. But 80% of the class is not at the 6th standard level, right? And how do you cater to this diversity? So that's where technology can play a big role, right? Because technology can adapt to every child at their level. So in that classroom where you have 40 children who are 12 years old, who are in school standard 6, but actual ability ranges from 1 to 6, the software can actually ratchet down. So to Priya, the software can actually, challenge her with algebra because she's very bright. But to Ram, the software can, actually teach multiplication because that's what Ram needs to know, and everything in between. And that is one beauty of the technology, that it's adaptive. The second part of technology is that you can customize it for every child. So some children are very fast, they will go through it fast. Some students need more support, they'll go through it slow. In fact, imagine a city like Bombay, right, where you have children who are speaking Telugu at home, Marathi at home, Urdu at home, Hindi at home, Gujarati at home, because Bombay is, a lot of migrant laborers have come in and they all go to the same school. You can actually have MindSpark in 5 different languages to help each child learn in a language that they are comfortable with, right? So technology can adapt, technology can contextualize for a child, technology can, variate the speed at which every child is learning. So no 2 children in MindSpark have the same path. Finally, the one thing that distinguishes MindSpark from other edtech software is the fact that it's built on, now 20 years of research based on our assessments and how children learn. So it's not just a digitized textbook. It's not just got fancy 3D animation for the sake of it. What it is trying to do is ensure that every concept a child is learning with understanding.
Right. So once the student takes the MindSpark initial assessments, and then once we get to know where the student involved, does it create a mechanism for the teachers to know where the student is and then create assessments according to their stand?
Absolutely. I mean, in all of this, I think the role of the human teacher is central and critical. And MindSpark is not a replacement for the human teacher. It's basically an assistant to the teacher, right? So MindSpark is giving the teacher a lot of this data in consolidated form. So imagine you are a teacher and you know the learning level of every child. You know, like that the fact that Priya is, very bright and doing algebra, and you know that Ram is struggling with multiplication even before you walked into the classroom, right? Because the data to the teacher is made available. It can even tell you that, Sham and Abdul and Christina are the three children who don't understand fractions, right? So it can essentially capture a lot of the data that is generated, because we're constantly asking the student questions and determining their knowledge state, and provide that to teacher in a very useful manner. So there's a lot of capacity building of the teacher in terms of how to use data, in terms of how to teach topics, to whom to teach it, when to teach it. And the teacher is very much at the heart and center of this thing. So it's almost like a teacher has, now the teacher was alone before. The teacher had to teach 40 students in the classroom. And if you also have MindSpark, now suddenly the teacher is there, but it has 40 digital assistants where every child is learning at their own pace, and the teacher is walking around and helping students to where their learning is. And all of this, we're only doing a 50-50 blend. So in 1 week, if you have 6 periods of math, there are 3 periods where the teacher is just teaching the way she was with the blackboard, with the green board. And the other 3 sessions, children are doing MindSpark, and the teacher is there helping students who get stuck.
So while the teacher half of the days teach the regular classes and all, right, but still there would be some students who are, back of some students regarding to understand few of the concepts. I mean, how do you guys balance that? I hope my question was clear.
Yeah, I mean, that is a problem. Like, see, without technology, it's very hard, right? And what a typical day is, the teacher is just teaching the students sitting in the first 2 benches, right? When a question comes up, there are only 3 students raising the hand all the time, and the teacher says, "Tum bolo," and then he says it very well, and just "Shabash, baith jao." And the children who are at the back of the class, the teacher is like, "Inko kuch nahi aata, ye dafar hai, inke to maa baap bhi unko, करते हैं, like इनका तो कुछ नहीं होगा." So mentally the teacher has written off half of the class and is just focusing on children who are sort of amongst the bright, right? Because the teacher's boss is saying, "Boss, finish the 6th standard syllabus." Now the beauty in this is that because no matter, like, whatever, so quote unquote, you are a duffer in front of your friends, you don't know the basics. MindSpark doesn't discriminate. MindSpark doesn't care if you are a boy or a girl, you are Gora or Kala, you are in normal or special. You could be anybody. In front of the computer, the only thing that MindSpark is doing is, abhi tere ko kitna aata hai aur aage teko kya seekhna hai, right? And that is a great benefit. Like, the human mind psychologically discriminates, whereas computers cannot discriminate on some of these visual parameters that as a society we do. So regardless whether a 6th standard child doesn't know what is the number 2 or doesn't know the letters, starting from there, it's helping every child learn at their own pace, at their own style, at their own speed, and it's paying attention to every child and supplementing whatever the teacher is doing. So supposing the teacher is doing a group reading session, supposing the teacher is doing an activity-based learning, supposing the teacher is talking about values, supposing the teacher is, being that loving person that children can relate to, those are things computers cannot do. And that is what the role of the human teacher is there. But on the learning front, computers can do a lot. And actually, in some cases, they have a comparative advantage to what the teacher can do.
Right. Before going further, I'm just curious to know that, for me, one of the main aspects that technology brings to classroom is that immediate feedback, right? So if I answer a question, I get an immediate feedback of yes or no. So I'm just curious to know, does it immediate feedback like incorporate an urge to learn that concept in students? That is why online kind of a thing is, important or something?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a fantastic question. So, remember, like, when we went to school, right? The teacher would give maybe 15 questions for homework, or tell ke, exercise 3.2 kar lena textbook se, and you sort of do it in your notebook. You give it to the teacher takes it to the staff room, corrects it over the next 2-3 days. You get the notebook back, usme right mark kiya hai, wrong mark kiya hai. But now, when it's marked wrong with a red pen, you have no idea of what was wrong. and you've forgotten about it क्योंकि वो तो 2 दिन पहले किया था
Okay.
some. The beauty with technology and in a software like Mindspark is you get immediate feedback and customized to the mistake you made. So let's look at this with an example of a linear equation, which says 5x plus 10 is equal to 20, right? Now, the first step you do, let's say you do 5x is equal to 20 plus 10. And then you do 5x is equal to 30, and then you do x is equal to 30 into 5, and x is equal to 150. And then in the typical process, you get marked wrong 2 days later. And then you are like, I don't know, wrong ho gaya, galti ho gaya. Now, in Mindspark, the same equation would work as this way. You write 5x plus 10 is equal to 20. The next step, you write 5x is equal to 20 plus 10. And the system says, wait, when you move 10 to the other side, you have to subtract it. Or it says you have to subtract 10 from both sides. So you write, oh, okay, get it. So let me write 5x is equal to 20 minus 10. Now I've understood in that context that what I did was I subtracted 10 on both sides, right? Then I get 5x is equal to 10. And the system says, right. And it says x is equal to 10 multiplied by 5. And then it says, no, wait, there's a mistake here. You need to divide by 5 on both sides. So that, oh, acha, divide karna hota hai. So then you're like, x is equal to 10 divided by 5. System says, okay, x is equal to 2. The system is okay. Now, in this process, right, you're getting feedback instantly in microseconds, whether you're right or wrong. And the feedback is customized to the mistake you made, saying that you need to subtract, you need to divide, you need to move the signs, whatever. Because the feedback is instant and because it's customized, true learning is happening. So from the outside, it might look like, "Arey yaar, ye to ek assessment hai. Arey yaar, ye to exercise kar raha hai bacha." But truly what's happening is that it's forcing the child to think. It's forcing the child to read. It's forcing the child to try again. And that is where conceptually the child is, getting strengthened. And that's the beauty of, a technology-based software, is that it can give you instant feedback and customize to your era, which a human teacher would struggle to give it that fast and that quickly and that customized.
Right. So when we talk about this Mindspark, and especially the 95% of the students where they study in government schools or low-income private schools. So, I mean, do you think it's a game changer? Because from what I heard and from what I researched or something, it's not costly, right? When we compare to like some 100, 200 students. What's your view on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's a myth that technology is expensive. In the places we are working with, we are doing this for less than 3 to 4% of what the government is today spending on education per child per year. So technology is not expensive. In fact, the returns on investment on a high quality technology based program are some of the highest in the world, as said by independent third party agencies like JPAD. So let's sort of, because technology is like everything, right? So let's sort of bifurcate. There's a lot of research that shows that technology, when it's just a hardware procurement, adds zero improvement in learning. So if you just give every child a tablet or a laptop, if you just put a computer, if you just put a smart board, if you just put a projector, if you just sort of show animated content, there is research that shows that actually that adds zero impact on learning outcomes. In some cases, they found even negative because our children were just playing games. However, when technology has a high quality learning software, which is adaptive, which is based on pedagogy research, which is contextualized to a child, and which through data is constantly improving, can have some of the highest returns on investment. So that's how I look at it. So think about, now let's talk economics, right? Imagine there is a 8,000 rupee tablet, right? It's a 7-inch tablet. It's sort of one of these Lenovo's that you can buy for about somewhere between 6,000 to 8,000. Now this tablet can be used one period per day for 8 different grades, right? So imagine first period mein first standard aata hai, fourth period mein fourth standard aata hai, 8th period mein 8th standard aata hai. So now that 8,000 rupee device is used by 8 different students per day. So that's 1,000 rupees. And it's used at least for, let's say, we have seen it can last for up to 4 years, but conservatively, let's say it lasts for 2 years. So that's 500 rupees per child per year is the hardware cost. Software at large scale can be very cheap. It can be actually cheaper than a textbook. So if more than 5 lakh students are using, something like Mindspark would be less than 200 rupees per child per year, right? So overall, all inclusive, you can provide a high quality software plus hardware to a child for less than 700 rupees per child per year, compared to the government is currently spending somewhere between 20,000 rupees plus per child per year. So that's less than 4%.
Right.
And so, and for that 4% investment, there are studies that are showing that children are learning 2 to 2.5 times more than a control group. So it's almost like a 4%, shift in resources can give you a 200 to 250% return on investment on learning.
Right. Till now, whatever we talked and all, teacher plays a main role in all of this, right? But if we really think about that, a teacher who himself came from the same rote learning system which we're talking about, for him or her to adopt to the Mindspark or any kind of technology interventions, it needs some kind of unconditioning and all, right? So what do you guys do for that?
See, my strong belief is that teachers are excellent human beings, and all human beings want to learn, want to grow, want to do things differently. Teachers are actually motivated, they are inspired, they are there because they actually love to improve the learning, right? And when they are given the right framework, the right support, the right ecosystem, they can thrive. So teachers are doing it, right? Today, more than 80% of the teachers have smartphone with WhatsApp. Now, 10 years ago, if you had said, if we were to give a phone, will the teacher be able to do? And you would get like 90% teachers saying, no, we wouldn't do it. Or people would say that. But today, teachers have done that because it's easy to use. It solves a need of communication. You are able to do it in multiple languages. You are able to do it when you want. Phones are good. UI UX is good. Data is cheap, etc., etc., etc. So there is no reason to believe that a high quality learning product in schools that the teachers feel, "Kya ye mere bacche ko isse fayda hoga," will not sort of change behavior. And we have seen that happen. Like when we have gone to more than 10 different states and done this in more than, thousands of teachers, we have found that teachers see, अरे ये बच्चा तो बहुत शांत था, पहले तो कुछ बोलता था नहीं क्लास में, अभी तो देखो कैसे धनाधन answers दे रहा है. And they see that when some of their quietest and some of the most shy children are also answering correctly, the paradigm in their mind changes. They also find that children are able to write their name because, Mindspark requires you to write your username there. So they start seeing the benefits of technology. They start seeing कि जो बच्चों को ज़्यादा support चाहिए वो Mindspark help कर सकता है. They start seeing जो बच्चे बहुत होशियार है, Mindspark is giving them challenge question. So teachers are actually also seeing and integrating the benefits. Now, obviously, there will be some teachers who are like, boss, listen, I'm close to retirement, or, I don't want to do this, and you'll have a subset of those teachers. But let's for a minute believe that, more than 80% of our teachers can do it. And then you can do some very simple training programs and show them the benefit and let them do it. And we ultimately see that they thrive and they really appreciate the program.
Right. So can you say a bit about the JPAL report, which has shown the effectiveness of Mindspark, just for our viewers to understand how successful and effective Mindspark is?
Yeah, so JPAL is started by Abhijit Banerjee and Esther Duflo, and it's a network of international researchers, and those two people got the Nobel Prize this year. So it's a very, very well-renowned organization. They do randomized control trials, not just in education, but in other sectors of health, agri, income, skilling, etc. A randomized control trial at the very heart of it is, let's say, two groups that are equivalent and give one of them intervention and one of them not. I mean, in medical field, this has been done for many, many years. But let's say in other fields, the way this works is, let's say there are 200 schools that are shortlisted. And then you essentially put different parameters like size, urban versus rural, distance from city, etc., etc. And then you essentially randomize. So 100 of them will get an intervention like Mindspark and 100 of them not. And when you test the baseline, you find that these two groups are equivalent, which is as a group, right? I mean, obviously the students are different, schools are different, but as a group, the students in the 100 schools, as far as their learning is considered, are equivalent. And there's not much difference in learning levels. And then you repeat this test after 1 year, after 2 years, after 3 years. In Rajasthan, we are doing a 3-year RCT. And you see how much have the children learned. Now, because everything else is the same, the state is the same, the district is the same, the block is the same, on average, the students, teachers, all schemes, all of those are the same. So the control group undergoes some learning, right? Because there also the teachers are coming, students are learning something at home, whatever. So there is some learning happening. And in the intervention group, now, is the intervention group learning the same as the control group, or is it learning more or less? So what we found in the JPAL study of MindSpark is that the students in the intervention group were learning about 2 to 2.5 times more than the control group, which is everything else being equal. Children are learning double or about 2.5 times, which is a big deal. The other big insight that came was that all students are learning more, which is very weak students are learning double to 2.5 times compared to their control group. Students who are average are learning more, and students who are very bright are also learning more, right? So regardless of where you were starting out, everybody is learning much, much more than the control group. Now, subsequently, there was another agency that did the study, and it found that children are learning about 9 to 17 times more in another city in Lucknow and in 55 government schools. But essentially, MindSpark now has 3 independent agencies that have done rigorous systematic studies on the impact that MindSpark is having on the learning of students, and it's finding some very promising results. And then this has now been, published by The Economist. Harvard Business School has written a case study on it. Stanford Social Innovation Review has written an article on it. Brookings has written an article on it. World Bank. And even the government is sort of, based on this case study, has released guidelines to states on how to implement personalized adaptive learning in schools to improve learning outcomes.
Right. Now, talking about the COVID crisis, it has taken the technology. Right. So I just want to know 2 things. First thing is, how do you see after crisis the education sector? And second thing is, do you think this, increase in use of technology into education increases the inequality of access? Because still, technology is still privileged in our country, right?
Yeah, fantastic questions again. I think post-COVID, you see a lot of news about technology, education technology companies raising a lot of money, but they're all catering to rich children, right? So the lowest price of those products would be a few thousand rupees, going up to tens of thousands of rupees. So that's catering to, let's say, the top 20-25% of India. Now, for the bottom, right, so 60% of the students go to government schools. I mean, they sometimes don't even have a smartphone, some of those things. So I think, we very quickly pivoted, and we made a product which was previously used by students in computers in offline settings inside the government schools. We made it quickly available to work on smartphones. And we're also now experimenting with how can we conduct assessments and do learning over WhatsApp, which is there. So see, partly it is true that the children who don't have technology are not getting the same access as children who have technology, and that is true. There's no denying that. However, what is the counterfactual, right? So does that mean we don't do anything on technology because it is increasing inequality? No, that's not the right answer either. So I think what we have to do is we have to constantly push the envelope on doing creative ways to reach these students. So let's say children who have a computer and internet, they are doing something. Children who have a smartphone, they are doing something else. Children who just have a phone, maybe they can dial in and listen to a story. Children maybe who don't have a phone are switching on a TV. Children who don't have a TV are learning something from radio. So every step, we have to think of what can we provide these children. Education must continue, because COVID or no COVID, the child is getting older every day by one single day, every year by one single year. And it is important we get education to them. Technology in its many forms and avatars and penetration rates, has to provide different solutions for some of these children. And worst case, there are NGOs who are going to every household, giving them a worksheet and doing the best everyone can. So I think technology is only helping that, right? Because imagine if there was no technology, which means there was no radio, no TV, no smartphone, no dumb phone, no computer, then we would still be in a much, much, much more worse situation than when we are today.
Right. So before we ending this, one more quick question. I'm very sorry. So since you mentioned about how 10th class assessment is dictating 9th class assessment and then 8th class assessment, right? The scene the situation in the higher education is also not so great in India. I mean, at least from my experience, I can say that. So do you think, again, changing the assessment there would, again, follow the back approach and then getting a program like Mindspark would help? Basically, what I'm trying to ask is that can this be replicated into the higher education space?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I think, see, the beauty of the board exam reform, right? And I'm specifying the 10 standard because, Pranay, for every 100 children who enter grade 1, less than half of them actually are still in grade 10, right? The others drop out. And after grade 10, there's bifurcation into multiple streams. More people drop out when they come to college, and so on and so forth. So 10 standard is one of those exams which whoever is at least still that age, in school is taking it. And it's also this thing, in many government jobs and other jobs, they ask 10 standard mein kitne marks aaye, 10 standard pass ya fail kind of a thing. And so 10 standard is it's serving the vast majority of India. It's that one single exam that everybody, that most of the students take. Now, improving the board exam is essentially financially not that expensive, right? Because it's not like I'm saying sub school mein computer lagao. It's not like I'm saying hajaro teacher ka training karo. I'm saying that over the next 5 years, if the questions that check for conceptual understanding can go from the low single digit percentages to, let's say, half of the paper, right? So you leave the half of the paper as is, you let a whole bunch of students pass the way they are. But if half of the paper has questions that check for conceptual understanding, it will just cause a ripple effect in the entire system, where I think that both in grade 9, 8, all the way to 5, the questions will essentially check for conceptual. The whole energy. See, the good thing about India is everybody wants to work hard. Students want to work hard. Parents want to push hard. Teachers are sort of demanding. Tuition teachers are so you channelize that energy towards questions that check for conceptual understanding. And I think, that I think would be great. Now, once you do that, automatically the incoming population that goes into 11th standard, that goes into the college, is going to get better, because they have much stronger foundation, much stronger concepts. And eventually, the same exam reform process can be started in school, colleges also. And again, this doesn't have to be serial processing. Today itself, you can change all of these exams, right, over a 5-year period. But I think, to me, that seems like the highest return on investment, because literally there is no extra cost except the one-time, effort of making this change, communicating this change, training the people who make the exam, making better questions. But it's literally very little money in the grand scheme of things.
Right. Thank you so much. It was lovely talking to you, and all the best to all the great work you guys are doing there.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for reaching out. Great initiative on doing these podcasts, and best of luck as you find a meaningful career ahead of you.
Yeah, thank you. I must end with this. I'm a great fan of EI Dialogues. Thank you so much for that.
A big shout out to Ritesh Agarwal and Ashna Shah, who actually are the producer-director combination for the EI Dialogues. So it's because of them, the EI Dialogues is what it is.